Chapter 504. A cold crescent moon hung in the night sky, and the stars in the sky shone brightly. In the wilderness deep in the mountains, the area that had been burned by the fire during the day was pitch black under the moonlight. In this place where the intense battle had taken place during the day, Yu Qianqiu stared at the 50 members of the special forces in front of him. Apart from their team uniforms, all of them had changed into ordinary people's clothes, revealing their original appearances. You all seem to be in good spirits. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, I still remember that when you first joined Utopia, most of you were still at the core formation stage. In just a few years, all of you have reached the early stage of the tribulation passing stage. My painstaking efforts to nurture you all weren't in vain. The 50 of them clenched their right fists in unison and bowed slightly. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand, and his expression gradually turned solemn. He said in a deep voice, soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. A few days ago, I asked for 50 capable members from your chief instructor, and Director Guan chose you all. I hope you won't disappoint me. We'll do our best until our last breath. The 50 of them replied in unison in a low voice. I don't want you to die. I want you to live. I want you to live and complete the mission. The hard work we put in today is so that we can live a better life in the future. This is the dream that we Utopia people have been fighting for all our lives, so I don't need you to die, Yu Qianqiu said in a calm and affectionate tone. The 50 of them clenched their fists and bowed again in excitement. Yu Qianqiu nodded in satisfaction and said, the code name for this mission is Scout Point. Do you all understand the mission's objective? Keep a low profile, the 50 of them replied softly. That's right. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, I don't need you to fight and kill. When carrying out the mission, you'll be black bats in the night, trying your best to avoid being discovered by anyone. In between missions, you'll be ordinary mortals in the secular world. You mustn't let anyone discover that you're cultivators. I asked Director Chen to provide you with various spirit pills, weapons, equipment, and resources. Have you gotten them? Got it. Number 50 replied again. All right, Yu Qianqiu nodded his head and said, if there's an emergency, immediately send out a distress signal. Don't force yourself. Remember, I don't need you to die. I will do my best to save each and every one of you, because each and every one of you is a member of the special forces that I have painstakingly trained. Although there will be sacrifices when there are struggles, I don't need you to make meaningless sacrifices. That would be meaningless to you, to your comrades, to the entire Utopia, or even to me. Do you understand? Understood. After the mission is completed, send a signal, and I will bring you back to Utopia. Yu Qianqiu looked at the sky and nodded. According to the original plan, the mission will start from the Daong Kingdom. Then, it will be carried out according to the missions we received. Order. All 50 of them stood at attention. Yu Qianqiu said in a deep voice, the exploration operation begins now. Let's go. Long live the leader. Number 50 exclaimed softly. Then, they identified the direction and quickly scattered in all directions without any hesitation. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned in a circle and watched his team disappear into the night. Some time ago, he had begun to make preparations. He had continuously sent information to Guan Yu and asked Guan Yu to select the members and make a detailed plan. With the convenience of having a detailed topographic map of the various countries in his hands, the plan was quickly perfected. Only then did he name the mission Exploration. The so-called exploration operation was to send team members to infiltrate the various countries and secretly plant the teleportation points that Yu Qianqiu needed at the important locations of the various countries' cultivation worlds. For example, preparations had to be made in advance near the spirit stone mines and important places such as the various sections. As Yu Qianqiu brought back a sum of spirit stones to Utopia, there were more and more early-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators in Utopia. It was enough for him to plan a large-scale attack. However, it seemed a little unrealistic for him to rely on himself to plant teleportation points all over the various countries. Firstly, due to the accident of kidnapping Yin Wufeng and extorting Yin Baikong, his identity had been exposed. He was now too big of a target, and people would probably pay attention to him wherever he went. Secondly, his cultivation was not high enough. Even if he did not expose his identity, it would still take him a lot of time to run all over the various countries. Currently, it was best to send a group of special forces to carry out the mission in secret. With more than 300 countries and 50 special forces members, it would be enough for each person to be assigned to a few countries. If there were no accidents, it would probably be completed in half a year. Of course, it would be faster to send more than 300 special forces members at once, but that would be too big of a target. At the same time, in order to prevent accidents and minimize losses, it was better to have as many capable people as possible. Moreover, some things often happened outside of the plan. He had not been here for long, so he needed to understand more. Moreover, there was another great benefit to him traveling openly in the various countries. He could clear himself of suspicion, and no one would suspect him. For example, there was an accident in country A, but he was thousands of miles away in country B. Who would be able to link these two incidents to him? The next day, Zhang Ping continued to participate in his martial arts competition for a spouse, which made Baiwan Nation's contestants very depressed. With this guy around, no one had the confidence to beat him. It seemed that they had come for nothing. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, did not have the intention to go to the palace again. He did not want to watch that stupid martial arts competition. After getting to know third brother Xan, he wandered around Dayang City for the next few days. With a friend like third brother Xan, Yu Qianqiu felt that it was a good thing. Third brother Xan knew everything about the various countries, so he could ask him if he had any questions. He followed third brother Xan to visit his friends' houses. Although the others did not have a good impression of Yu Qianqiu, they still reluctantly entertained him for third brother Xan's sake. However, after visiting a few houses and learning some news, Yu Qianqiu's expression turned a little ugly, and he was no longer in the mood to stroll around. The two of them returned to Baiwan Nation's embassy. Third brother Xan's expression was also a little ugly. There was no other reason. Yu Qianqiu's actions this time had caused the various countries to lose face. Many experts had already been ordered to come and take Yu Qianqiu's life to regain their lost face. One of third brother Xan's good friends revealed that it was actually fake to regain face. In fact, cultivators from various countries had their eyes on Yu Qianqiu's two treasured sabers. Under the watchful eyes of the public, although the soul formation cultivators behind the scenes wanted to snatch the two treasured sabers, they could not openly snatch the items of the younger generation. In fact, this was also a lie. If no one knew, would the soul formation cultivators make a move? In the cultivation world, it was not uncommon to see people secretly snatching the precious qi gathering pill. Being concerned about one's identity was just a pretense. Many soul formation cultivators had done it. Most importantly, once a soul formation cultivator made a move, the others would definitely not be polite. At that time, the soul formation cultivators from various countries would definitely fight. Therefore, they all secretly reached an agreement to send their elite disciples to take action. Whoever snatched the sabers and brought them back would own them. Fortunately, Hua Zongming did not want his own capital, Dayang City, to suffer. He said that he would find a way to drive Yu Qianqiu out of Dayang City. The countries where the other soul formation cultivators resided also had their own capitals. Everyone put themselves in Yu Qianqiu's shoes and didn't want to break this rule. Otherwise, retribution could come to their own territories at any time. Everyone could only wait for Yu Qianqiu to leave Dayang City. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou's expression showed that he was very doubtful. Third Lord Axian coughed awkwardly. Let me put it this way. Actually, although your sabers are good, in the hands of cultivators below the soul-forming stage, they won't have any effect at all. It's better to give them a better flying sword. But in the hands of a soul-forming stage cultivator, it's different. Fights between soul-forming stage cultivators usually rely on their high cultivation to fight in close combat. Long-range attacks are almost impossible to hurt because everyone's speed is unbelievably fast. Think about it, if this kind of saber fell into the hands of a soul-forming stage cultivator, it would be too useful. Chapter 505. Yu Qianzhou agreed with this statement. He empathized with them. No matter how powerful the saber was, it was useless against those with high cultivation. If he couldn't catch up with them, he wouldn't be able to slash them. Otherwise, he could really kill them with one strike. It was indeed not as good as a flying sword. If it fell into the hands of a spirit-severing cultivator, he couldn't think of anything that could resist the sharpness of the black-flamed saber other than the nether iron. The key was that those ignorant spirit-severing cultivators didn't know that even if he gave it to them, it would instantly collapse into black flame once it was too far away from him. But not many people knew this secret except for his master, Nongzhu, and Zi. The three of them knew that his flying sword and saber were condensed from black flame. As for the others, he didn't want to reveal this secret. Aren't your master, Lingfang Valley Master, and your elder brother also at spirit-severing stage? I have 2 sabers here, one for each of them. Yu Qianzhou pretended to ask casually. Third brother Axian scratched his head and smiled bitterly. Your proposal is really good. If you're really willing to give it to me, I'll naturally accept it and thank you. But the premise is that you're willing, and I don't think you're willing. The most important thing is that I never thought of getting my hands on your treasured saber. People from our Spirit Fang Valley don't do this kind of forceful thing. Otherwise, my master won't forgive me. If you don't believe me, I can swear to God. Oh. Yu Qianzhou blinked his eyes. Could it be that the most beautiful woman in the world was an angel with both character and beauty? A top-grade girl. These 3 words suddenly popped up in his mind. He couldn't help but want to meet her as soon as possible. He wanted to see how beautiful the most beautiful woman in the world was to be able to bear the title of the most beautiful woman in the world. He subconsciously thought that it would be great if no one stopped Wen Lanfeng from going to the demon domain when he came out of seclusion. Otherwise, he might be killed by his master. If Lu Yanqing were to lose such a flower protector, then... Yu Qianzhou was shocked by his own dirty thoughts. Speaking of the world's most beautiful woman, this world's most beautiful woman had just left the Holy Land of Baiwan Nation, and when Rui arrived right after her. The Holy Land of Baiwan Country was located deep in the mountains in the hinterland of Baiwan Country. Waterfalls, clear springs, birdsong, fragrant flowers, mountains and fields. It was a place rarely visited by humans, but there was a large number of pavilions and buildings hidden in it. It was the holy land of the Wen clan of Baiwan Country, and also the place where the cultivators of the Wen clan cultivated. When Rui returned to the sacred land and immediately went to the valley where the patriarch was in seclusion. At the end of the valley was a stone cliff. In the middle of the cliff, there was a sealed cave. At this moment, the dark entrance of the cave was opened. Obviously, the patriarch had broken out of the cave and really came out. At this moment, a figure suddenly teleported and appeared beside Wen Rui, who was floating in the air. This person's appearance was similar to Wen Rui's, but he was fairer. He was Wen Rui's younger brother Tang, Wen Xiu, a cultivator in the late transcending tribulation. After seeing Wen Rui, he said with a smile, "Big brother, you're back. Have you seen Mr. Nongzhu?" Wen Rui didn't have time to chat with him, so he asked directly, "Where is the patriarch?" After the patriarch came out of seclusion, he asked some questions. He didn't stay long and then left, saying that he had something to do. As when Xiao spoke, he suddenly realized something and said, "Big brother, you are a step too late." Just now, the Spirit Fragrance Valley Master came personally to look for the Patriarch. When he saw that the Patriarch was not around, he immediately left. "You." When Rui was so angry that he didn't know what to say. He pointed at him and shouted angrily, "Didn't I tell you to stop the Patriarch? Why did you let him go?" "I did. But how could I stop him?" When Xiao said with a bitter face. "It's over." When Rui murmured to himself with a pale face. There was no need to guess. There were only two places that the Patriarch was most likely to go after coming out of seclusion, Spirit Fang Valley and the Demon Domain. The Valley Master of Spirit Fang Valley didn't meet him along the way. Needless to say, he must have gone to the Demon Domain to seek revenge on Bai Changchun. It was hard to imagine the scene of the Patriarch and Bai Changchun fighting. When Rui's heart was in his throat. It didn't matter if the Patriarch was defeated. The most important thing was that he came back alive. Otherwise, it was unknown how long the Baiwan nation could last in this precarious situation. The nation had been established for many years and had many enemies. The key was that no one dared to act recklessly with the Patriarch. Once he was gone, the consequences would be unimaginable. "Big brother, what's wrong?" When Xiao asked worriedly. When Rui turned his head stiffly and said in a stern voice, "Don't you know that the Patriarch is most likely going to find Bai Changchun? Why didn't you stop him with your life and wait for me to come back?" When Xiao paused and said, "Big brother, I know what you're worried about, but the Patriarch has been in seclusion for many years. He must have the confidence to defeat Bai Changchun. Otherwise, how could he be so reckless?" "Big brother, I think you're worrying too much." "I hope so." When Rui sighed helplessly. He had no other choice now. With his speed, it was impossible to catch up with the Patriarch. Moreover, there was a time difference, so it was even more impossible to catch up. He was afraid that by the time he arrived at the Demon Domain, the outcome would have already been decided. Now, even if he wanted to use his great cultivation to persuade the Patriarch to come back, he could not get in touch without confirming the correct location. The only thing he could do now was to wait for the final result anxiously. When Lan Feng, dressed in a grey robe, was tall and slender. He was neither fat nor thin. Although his appearance was not as good as Nongzhu's, he was definitely a handsome man. The only flaw was that there was a touch of sadness between his eyebrows, and the stubble on his cheeks made him look a little decadent. In his calm and clear eyes, there was a lingering melancholy. When he looked back, the melancholy in his eyes seemed to be able to turn people into ashes. To be exact, it was soul-stirring. It was believed that this kind of eyes could attract many women. Coupled with his outstanding appearance and profound cultivation, no one knew why he couldn't attract the world's most beautiful woman, so he was so sad. When Rui and the others guessed correctly. After when Lan Feng came out of seclusion, he did go to find Bai Changchun. At this time, he was flying straight through the sky, and his powerful cultivation forced out a transparent semi-arc-shaped light shield in front of him. He had already crossed the Demon Domain at a terrifying speed. In the sky above Shantian Island in the 1,000-mile lake, a shadow crossed the sky. When Lan Feng stood quietly in the air. He stared at the island and the lake below with a complicated expression, and then slowly swept his eyes around. 100 years ago, it was here that he, who had always been proud of his cultivation, could not withstand 10 moves from his opponent. Only 10 moves. His opponent had seriously injured him. Thinking of this, a bitter smile appeared on Wen Lanfeng's face. That was the biggest mockery to him, the so-called second expert in the world. The second expert could not even withstand 10 moves from the first expert, and was seriously injured on the spot. If it were not for Nongzhu's timely rescue, he would not have been able to return to this world-famous Shantian Island. 100 years of painstaking cultivation, abandoning all love and selfish thoughts, surprised even himself. He broke through the shackles of cultivation one after another, and his cultivation climbed to new heights. Looking back at his previous cultivation, it was like watching a joke. At that time, he felt that it would be difficult for his cultivation to break through again. He did not expect that Bai Changchun's lesson would give him such a great benefit. He was confident that his current cultivation was worlds apart from that time. If he continued to cultivate in that state, in less than 100 years, his seventh soul hero would merge back into his life's soul, and he would be able to ascend to the immortal realm. This was a legend that had not been seen in the cultivation world for many years. However, Wen Lanfeng did not want to ascend to the immortal realm now. He had worries in his heart, and he did not want to become an immortal. As long as he defeated Bai Changchun, he could be with the person he loved. In his opinion, what was the point of becoming an immortal? It was better to stay with the person he loved for a long time. Wen Lanfeng could not help but smile when he thought of his vision of staying with Liu Yanqing. Bai Changchun's life was coming to an end, and he had not been able to ascend to the immortal realm. He must have encountered a bottleneck in his cultivation. He had already broken through that bottleneck, and he only needed to merge his seventh soul hero and life soul before he could ascend. However, he was suppressing his desire to merge with Bai Changchun, which meant that Bai Changchun was no match for him. The position of the world's #1 expert should be replaced. But I have no interest in the empty title of the world's #1 expert. I only want to be with Yanqing. Bai Changchun, you spared my life back then, and I will spare your life now. Wen Lanfeng thought. Ha! Wen Lanfeng felt a little strange. Could it be that his cultivation was so high that Bai Changchun did not notice his arrival? Or was Bai Changchun not on the island at all? He swept his gaze across the island and saw a woman in white tending to the flowers and plants on the island. He could tell at a glance that she was a plant spirit. In another open space, a woman in purple was jumping around crazily, and her movements were very strange. He did not expect to see 2 more women on Shuntian Island. That seemed to be Nongzhu's disciple, Zi. Was Nongzhu also on the island? Wen Lanfeng recognized Zi. Zi, is that you? Wen Lanfeng called out softly. Who called me? Zi, who was drenched in sweat, stopped her posture and looked around. Her gaze finally fell on a figure floating quietly in the air. When she saw who it was, her mouth turned into a cute circle. Lady Mu also noticed the visitor in the air. Zi calmed herself down and flew into the air in a flash. After confirming that it was Wen Lanfeng, she stammered in disbelief, Senior. Senior Wen, why are you here? She really did not dare to believe that Wen Lanfeng would come here. This was the place where he was once humiliated. Could it be that he came here with Senior Bai? Zi had vaguely guessed that possibility. Why can't I come? Wen Lanfeng smiled confidently and said, since you are here, your master must be here too. Where are they? He looked around again. Chapter 506. Seeing that Zi knew him, Miss Mu thought that Zi was also a friend of the punishment envoy, so she went back to her work. My master left. He's not in the demon region, Zi said anxiously. She was afraid that things were not as she thought. Both of them were her master's friends, and she did not want anything to happen to either of them. Hey! Nongzhu actually left you alone on Shuntian Island. Wen Lanfeng frowned and said, Bai Changchun is not here either. Where did he go? Senior Bai and ancestor Nanming just left, Zi said, biting her lips. Nanming is also here. Did Bai Changchun invite Nanming here to refine the treasure? Wen Lanfeng frowned. It seemed that he had come at the wrong time, so he asked, Zi, are they refining the treasure in the demon region? I don't know, I think so. Ze replied obediently. This person was not only a friend of her master, but also a top master in the cultivation world, ranking just below senior Bai, so she was a little afraid. Since he just left, he should not have started refining, so he won't disturb Bai Changchun's business, when Lanfeng nodded and said to himself. He was quite self-aware, afraid that he would accidentally ruin Bai Changchun's business by rushing here. Ze asked cautiously, Senior Wen, are you going to duel with Senior Bai? It's not a duel, just a competition. I'll leave after the competition. I won't disturb his business. When Lanfeng said this confidently, implying that he only wanted to challenge Bai Changchun, and that he would leave after defeating him. He would not hurt him. His figure rose again, and from dozens of meters to hundreds of meters above the lake, he said loudly, Bai Changchun, time flies, and we haven't met for 100 years. When Lanfeng has come to visit you recklessly, please come out for a while. He spoke politely and softly, but Ze and Miss Mu could clearly hear when Lanfeng's voice from all directions, and even the echoes from afar were of the same volume, so they could not tell where the voice came from. It was just this one sentence. The voices stacked on top of each other, echoing for a long time. It was as if people were saying the same thing over and over again. The sound spread out like waves, spreading far and wide. It was unknown how far it had traveled. Wherever the voice reached, all the demons and ghosts fell silent, looking in the direction of the obedient island with fear in their eyes. The voice didn't sound like much, but both the Demon King and the Ghost King knew that it was impossible to transmit such a soft voice so far without a shocking cultivation base. At the very least, they couldn't do it. Ze secretly clicked her tongue. As expected of the second strongest expert in the world. Just by revealing a bit of his strength, he was able to use methods that shocked the world. Madame Mu, on the other hand, shuddered subconsciously. She thought that not only was this torture envoy formidable, even his friends had unfathomable cultivation base. Within the array that sealed the blue flames beneath Twilight Valley, the blue flames released dazzling azure hues. Bai Changchun shook out a pile of rare items he had collected over the years. Grandmaster Nanming squatted on the ground and fiddled with them as he said, refine these items to their purest state. After the next green fire erupts, when the fire is at its most stable state, we can fuse them and refine them. Bai Changchun nodded. 2 days from now should be the day the blue fire erupts. 3 days from now, we can begin the refinement. Nanming, when the time comes, I'll be counting on you. Don't say it's too early. The chances of a high-quality spirit treasure being refined into a treasure are extremely low. I'm worried that it will be like last time, refining a high-quality spirit treasure into a defective one. Just don't blame me when the time comes, the Nanming ancestors said with a bitter smile. Feel free to refine it. The gains and losses are the will of the heavens. I won't force it, Bai Changchun calmly said. Ah! This blue fire is a good thing. If only my Xianxian island had it. The Nanming ancestor sighed, then he suddenly thought of something and asked, Bai Changchun, I remember that you used to have an intermediate-grade spirit treasure sword. Was it not enough for you? I don't think I saw you take it out last time in the Eastern Sea. There probably isn't anyone in the cultivation world that can make you draw your sword, right? There aren't any in the cultivation world, but it doesn't mean that there aren't any in the Holy East lands, Bai Changchun said slowly. The Nanming ancestor shook his head. He didn't know what to say. Who knew that Bai Changchun would add, when my cultivation broke through to the late stage of soul formation, I wanted to test my cultivation. Who knew that the intermediate-grade spirit treasure couldn't withstand my full power and instantly shattered into pieces? That's why I asked you to refine a superior-grade spirit treasure. I hope it can withstand the full power of my cultivation. What? The Nanming ancestor exclaimed. The intermediate-grade spirit treasure couldn't withstand the power of his cultivation. He asked in shock, oh my god. An inferior grade spirit treasure should be able to withstand the use of a late-stage soul formation cultivator. But the intermediate grade spirit treasure can't withstand your cultivation. This. By Changchun, you're still a late-stage soul formation cultivator? I don't know either. That's why I want to go to the Holy East Lands to prove it. I want to figure out what's going on. Bai Changchun also smiled bitterly. He then waved his hand and said, "Let's not talk about this. Let's hurry. Otherwise, the green fire will be unstable in 2 days and we'll have to postpone it again." The few old fellows were just about to discuss business when they heard Ze exclaim, "Oh! Furong, why are you here?" "Hibiscus." "Ze! Why are you here?" Hibiscus said in surprise. When they were on supporting Immortal Island, Yu Qianqiu had brought Ze over once. The two of them knew each other and knew that the other had a good relationship with Yu Qianqiu. The two women threw everything to the back of their minds and started chatting. The tense atmosphere between the two great experts of the world, which was on the verge of breaking out, was instantly destroyed by these two girls. Ancestor Nanming elbowed Nongzhu and asked, "Hey! Who is this Hibiscus?" Bai Changchun and Wenlan Feng could not remember whose daughter Furong was. Nongzhu would not bring an ordinary person to Shantian Island. However, the two of them didn't know that Hibiscus was just a small disciple of supporting Immortal Island. Given their status, who would care about a mere Fuxian Island? Moreover, he was just a disciple on the island. Naturally, he wouldn't remember who Hibiscus was. Damn it! Don't get touchy. How am I supposed to know? Nongzhu retracted his elbow and stared at the two girls. He had raised Ze since she was young. He was her father, her mother, and her master. In short, Ze grew up in the purple bamboo forest and never had a friend, let alone a close friend. When he saw Ze and Hibiscus chattering happily, he suddenly realized that he was wrong, very wrong. Nonsense. Ancestor Nanming pointed below and questioned, "If you don't know who she is, how can you bring her here? If you don't know who she is, how can she know Ze? Who are you trying to fool?" "How would I know? Yu Qianqiu didn't tell me." Nongzhu was also a little gloomy. Hearing that it was related to his disciple, Bai Changchun looked over and asked, "Nongzhu, what's going on?" Nongzhu was stunned and then said with a smile, "Yu Qianqiu said that this girl is his woman. He said that it would be dangerous if she followed him, so he asked me to bring her here to avoid the danger." Bai Changchun and Ancestor Nanming were stunned at the same time. They stared at Hibiscus and sized her up. Wenlan Feng's head was filled with bewilderment, but he was quite surprised. He thought to himself, "Who is Yu Qianqiu? How come I've never heard of him? He must be an extraordinary person to be able to make Nongzhu run errands and make Bai Changchun and Ancestor Nanming lose their composure." He had been in closed-door training for 100 years and Yu Qianqiu's previous life wasn't even born yet. How could he know who Yu Qianqiu was? It was enough for him to think about it slowly. Among the 4 people in the sky, 3 of them were the 4 great men of the cultivation world. They were only missing Lu Yanqing from Lingfang Valley. Ever since Ze and Yu Qianqiu toured the world of sensual pleasures, she was a little wild. Being trapped in Shantian Island was boring, so she practiced the awkward animal play every day to kill time. Hibiscus's arrival made her a little too excited. Finally, she had a companion. "Yu Qianqiu is too much. He brought you out to play, but he didn't bring me along. It's so dangerous outside. What's there to be afraid of? Danger is fun. If there's no danger, why would I go out with that guy?" As Ze said this, Nongzhu's face immediately turned as black as the bottom of a pot. Ancestor Nanming, who was at the side, looked at her and laughed. He thought that this girl was really funny and could compete with her master. It's really dangerous. It's not fun. Last time, Yu Qianqiu was beaten to the point of vomiting blood. I was scared to death. Yu Qianqiu was beaten to the point of vomiting blood. It can't be. That guy is very bad. Who can injure him? Is he okay? As soon as these two sentences were spoken, a somewhat oppressive aura filled the air. The breeze blowing around them instantly stopped. As the two girls spoke, they also felt that something was wrong. When they suddenly turned around, they suddenly found that the four experts in the sky were staring at them. Ze stuck out her tongue. The two girls shrunk in embarrassment and did not dare to say another word. What a strong aura. Wen Lanfeng's pupils shrank. She slowly turned to look at Bai Changchun. She thought that he was going to fight, but she found that he was staring at Nongzhu. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming looked at each other, then secretly turned their heads to look back. Nongzhu found that Bai Changchun was staring at her and could not help but smile awkwardly. Bai Changchun indifferently asked word by word, Nongzhu, who hurt Yu Qianqiu? Old Bai, don't think about it. His skin is rough and his flesh is thick. He has already recovered from a minor injury. Nongzhu said and shook her head with a bitter smile. She said, in fact, that guy asked for it. He claimed to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. It would be strange if people did not find trouble with him. I'll tell you in detail later. The aura of fear disappeared in an instant. Bai Changchun was stunned. He claimed to be the world's #1 expert, but his disciple ran out and claimed to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. If people knew that she was his disciple, it would really make him proud. Wen Lanfeng could not help asking, Nongzhu, who is this Yu Qianqiu? Why have I never heard of him? Nongzhu smiled and raised her chin toward Bai Changchun. She said, his last disciple. Wen Lanfeng uttered an awe and then hesitated. A famous master produces a brilliant disciple. No wonder he dares to claim to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. He must be worthy of it. Although it was a perfunctory compliment, it sounded a little harsh. Bai Changchun's calm face was slightly dark. It seemed that he felt ashamed for the first time in his long life. Nongzhu secretly thought, Wen Lanfeng, you really want to die. Aren't you being sarcastic? Sure enough, after Bai Changchun's face calmed down, he stared at Wen Lanfeng indifferently and said, from what you said before, do you mean that after 100 years of closed-door training, your cultivation has greatly improved and you came here to wash away your shame? Who was Wen Lanfeng? He was not a coward who was afraid to fight. He was provoked by Bai Changchun's words on the spot and his previous worries were immediately thrown out of the window. This was the true arrogance of a top expert. He would never retreat in the face of a battle and would only concentrate on one thing, to defeat his opponent. Life or death, victory or defeat, these were things to be considered after the battle. Wen Lanfeng laughed heartily and replied in a sonorous voice, the battle 100 years ago, Wen Lanfeng will never forget it. The 100 years of closed-door training is just to be qualified to meet the punishment master of the demon ghost region again. Today, I would like to experience the demeanor of the world's #1 expert again. The last sentence was particularly impassioned. Don't get excited, don't get excited. Nongzhu waved her hand anxiously between the two. However, both of them had entered a state of high spirits and simply ignored Nongzhu. Wen Lanfeng's whole body erupted with a strong fighting spirit. His grayish-white robe suddenly fluttered despite the absence of wind, stirring the surrounding airflow to gradually solidify and appear like blades. Ancestor Nanming quickly released a transparent protective upstanding chi, but unexpectedly, he still felt a little overwhelmed. The wind blades constantly made ear-piercing sounds on the upstanding chi, and the entire protective upstanding chi could be destroyed by the wind blades at any time. This was the turbulence caused by the light Qi before they started fighting. What would happen if they started fighting? Ancestor Nanming's eyes were full of horror. Wen Lanfeng was indeed worthy of his reputation as the world's second expert, but he did not expect him to be so powerful. It was far beyond his understanding of experts in the late stage of the incarnation realm. Without another word, Ancestor Nanming retreated in the face of difficulties. This was not a place where he could stay with his cultivation, so he quickly flashed back to the island. Nongzhu also had a protective upstanding qi, but her cultivation was obviously higher than Ancestor Nanming's. She shouted, "You two lunatics! There is no deep hatred between you two. Will you only be satisfied when you fight to the death? Get out of the way!" Wen Lanfeng shouted. His qi locked on to Nongzhu, and the dancing wind blades immediately swept over, cutting Nongzhu's protective upstanding qi to the point that it almost collapsed. Nongzhu immediately felt that she could not take it anymore, and she shouted, "You two lunatics, just die. You're making me worry less." As soon as she finished speaking, she quickly fled and was forced to leave. Bai Changchun, who was opposite Wen Lanfeng, was very quiet. His expression was indifferent, so quiet that it was a little ridiculous. He did not make as much noise as Wen Lanfeng. His clothes, beard, and hair did not even move in the chaotic wind. Wen Lanfeng's eyes were bright as he stared at Bai Changchun. The wind blades crazily swept towards Bai Changchun, but when they were 2 meters away from his body, the wind blades silently and inexplicably collapsed and disappeared. They had no effect on Bai Changchun. The few people on the island stared at him, and Lady Mu bit her lip. She already knew what was going to happen. She did not expect that she would have the opportunity to see the torture envoy, who was famous in the demon domain, in action. She did not know who the other person was, but he actually dared to challenge the torture envoy. "It seems that you've really made a lot of progress in the past 100 years of hard cultivation. You can't be compared to the past. No wonder you have the confidence to come to me," Bai Changchun said lightly. "I also feel that I've made a lot of progress." Wen Lanfeng nodded and asked, "How do I compare to you?" "I don't know my own cultivation level, and I've been looking forward to someone who can help me understand myself. After seeing you..." Bai Changchun shook his head slightly and said, "What a pity. The person who can help me understand is not you. You don't even know what level your cultivation has reached." Wen Lanfeng laughed and said, "I understand now. You mean that I'm still not your opponent?" Bai Changchun said, "It doesn't matter whether you're my opponent or not. The most important thing is that you must remember one thing." "What thing?" Wen Lanfeng asked. "Cultivators above the soul formation stage who trespasses the demon domain will die." Bai Changchun said lightly. "Ha!" Wen Lanfeng laughed and waved his hand. A cold light flashed out of his storage bag, and a wide long sword appeared in front of him. The blade was as wide as a palm, and there was a flowing mercury-like luster on its surface. Wen Lanfeng gently grabbed the hilt and said, "My giant silver sword failed to force your sword out, and it has been sealed until now. If you can force my sword out, I'll spare your life." Bai Changchun said quietly. "Ha!" Wen Lanfeng laughed wildly and said, "Bai Changchun, you're too conceited. Today, unless you're an immortal from the upper realm, I'll make you understand the bottom line of your cultivation level." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, there were thousands of Wen Lanfeng and thousands of giant silver swords in the air, standing above Bai Changchun's head. It was impossible to tell which one was real and which one was fake. The surrounding airflow was dead silent. On Obedient Island, Nongzhu and elder ancestor of Nanming looked at each other. The two women were stunned. They had seen people who could create many phantoms, but at this time, the thousands of Wen Lanfeng in the air were motionless as if they were real bodies. They moved. One of the thousands of Wen Lanfeng moved, and with a dazzling silver light, it drew a gorgeous and charming arc. From top to bottom, the sword came from the west, fast as lightning, and slashed toward Bai Changchun's head. Just as the sword was about to touch Bai Changchun, a third hand seemed to grow out of Bai Changchun's body, and his fingers were like picking flowers. Chapter 508. With a ding sound, it hit the side of the sword's edge, and the man and the sword disappeared without a trace. It was just a soft and crisp sound, without any great power that could shake people's hearts. Not even the sound of wind could be heard. However, it made people feel that everything in that space was still except for the two people fighting. The sound, light, and airflow gave people a feeling that they had been frozen. Hibiscus's cultivation was too low, so she couldn't see any clues. She was already dumbfounded when she saw the thousands of Wen Lanfeng's incarnations. Ze opened her mouth. According to her understanding, there could only be one real Wen Lanfeng among the thousands of incarnations, and the others were all phantoms. But how could phantoms turn into a tangible form and carry out a substantial attack? Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming understood that this seemingly peaceful place was extremely dangerous. The two of them restrained all of their great power and didn't waste any of it. All of their power was gathered between the sword and the finger. There were not many people in this world who could withstand this sword and finger. They moved again. A sword came from the south, followed by a sword from the east, and then from the north, south, east, and west. When Lanfeng's attacks were as dense as rain, one man and one sword were like flying immortals from the heavens, leaving behind a shadow. They abandoned all magnificence and only pursued a simple fatal blow. One man and one sword, only one sword, without any extra movements. One man and one sword's fatal blow was simple and unadorned, but when thousands of people and one sword's fatal blows fused together, it formed the most gorgeous visual shock. Thousands of Wen Lanfeng, thousands of huge silver swords, and thousands of silver electric shadows interweaved in the air to form a huge, gorgeous silver lotus in full bloom. Thousands of attacks, in the end, all focused on the flower's stem, and Bai Changchun was the white lotus stem that suffered the storm-like attacks. What a beautiful, blooming white lotus. Hibiscus was stunned. She never thought that cultivators could fight in this way. Ze was stunned. It was too spectacular. This was the fight between the world's #1 expert and the world's #2 expert. Lady Mu was afraid that the torturer couldn't withstand such an attack. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming stared at their every move without blinking their eyes. Bai Changchun's expression was calm. With his hands behind his back, he remained motionless like a mountain, withstanding the thousands of attacks in the sky. Thousands of arms also appeared on his shoulders, making him look like the thousand-armed Guanyin. It was extremely beautiful. Ding, ding, ding. A series of rapid and crisp sounds rang out. Every finger would hit its target, and every single one of them was able to thwart the sharpness of the giant's silver sword. With a flick of his finger, Wen Lanfeng's body and sword unity collapsed. In the blink of an eye, the silver lotus gradually dissipated in the air. It was a magnificent opening, but a depressing curtain call. Nongzhu and ancestor Nan Mian heaved a sigh of relief. If Wen Lanfeng's 1,000 swords unite was used on them, they would not be able to withstand 100 swords if they did not escape, let alone 1,000 swords. It seemed that only a person with an abnormally high cultivation like Bai Changchun could remain still like a mountain and deal with it with ease. Moreover, he didn't even draw his weapon and merely flicked his finger lightly to break Wen Lanfeng's 1,000 swords as one. His finger avoided the sharpness and flicked the side of the sword tip. It would be fine if it was just one or two, but it happened that thousands of swords burst out almost at the same time. There was probably no one in the world who could compare to him in terms of eyesight. Although the two were relieved, they knew that this was just the beginning of the warm-up, and the real fight was yet to come. Bai Changchun is indeed Bai Changchun. I can't believe that my 1,000 swords unite couldn't even force you to move a step. Wen Lanfeng's sigh sounded around, but but only his voice could be heard. "I don't have time to chat with you. If you don't make a move, I will," Bai Changchun said calmly. "Good. Then come on. Let me experience the power of the world's #1 master again." Wen Lanfeng's voice was still heard, but no one else could be seen. "You overestimate yourself." Bai Changchun snorted coldly. His figure flickered, and he also disappeared. The few people on the island looked around but found nothing. Suddenly, a series of rapid bangs sounded high up in the sky. They quickly looked up, and when the last bang sounded, they saw Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng appear above at the same time. The two had obviously fought several times in a race of speed. Otherwise, there would have been no sound for no reason. The two were so fast that the people below couldn't see them clearly. "Ah! Puff!" A muffled groan sounded in the air. Wen Lanfeng's figure seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. He fell like a meteor and quickly fell to the surface of the 1,000-mile lake. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming exchanged a surprised look. They could see that Wen Lanfeng was injured, but they didn't know what Bai Changchun had done to him. Whoosh! Bai Changchun's figure appeared intermittently from high up in the sky. This was not teleportation, but a pure speed pursuit. He chased after Wen Lanfeng. At their level of cultivation, it was impossible to cause effective damage to their opponents from afar. They needed to hit them head-on. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming's hearts were in their throats. Although Bai Changchun had injured Wen Lanfeng, he obviously didn't want to let Wen Lanfeng go and was chasing him. Sword without an arrow. Wen Lanfeng, who was falling rapidly, shouted and stopped in the air due to the strong inertia. The strong wind brought by his fall pressed a huge arc of deep whirlpool on the surface of the lake that was only a few dozen meters away from him. As the deep whirlpool bounced up, Wen Lanfeng, who had stopped, also bounced up and roared into the sky. The sword in his hand produced a giant sword aura that was more than 20 meters long. It stirred up huge chaotic sword shadows, like messy transparent thorns shooting through the air, madly stabbing at Bai Changchun who was chasing after him. The two powerhouses brazenly confronted each other head-on. However, Bai Changchun seemed to have fallen into a pile of crystal-clear thorns. Clang, clang, clang. The fight directly entered a white-hot stage. This was the last scene that the women in purple clothes saw clearly. Then, the figures of the two peerless powerhouses became blurred again. With the cultivation of the three women, they could no longer see clearly. They could only see the messy and terrifying sword aura sweeping everywhere. Bang, bang. The sound of banging was endless. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming's eyes almost narrowed into slits. They stared at the two people fighting with sparkling eyes. They knew that Bai Changchun did not want to destroy his territory, so he deliberately suppressed his destructive aura. Wen Lanfeng was not here to cause trouble. At the same time, in order not to show weakness, he also suppressed his destructive aura. Otherwise, with such a crazy fight between the two people, the power emitted was earth-shattering, and the shocking and terrifying shock wave alone could completely destroy Obedient Island. They could not just stand on the island and watch the show as if nothing had happened. TSK, TSK. Wen Lanfeng's cultivation has really improved by leaps and bounds. In the past, it would be impossible for him to fight against old Bai so valiantly. How strong! Nongzhu exclaimed. Ancestor Nanming glanced at him, knowing that he had seen the battle 100 years ago. His gaze returned to the two people fighting. The more Wen Lanfeng fought, the stronger his fighting spirit became. The defeat 100 years ago was so sullen that he almost did not have the strength to fight back and was beaten half to death. He had never had the opportunity to fight with an expert like Bai Changchun so happily. With the giant silver in hand, the sword moved with his heart. His entire body and mind were completely integrated with the sword, achieving the true unity of man and sword that he dreamed of. The sword was him, and he was the sword. With the unity of man and sword, he was invincible. Fighting against the world's #1 expert, his fighting spirit and heroic spirit soared to the sky. Wen Lanfeng was secretly amazed. It was a great blessing to be able to fight with an expert like Bai Changchun. It directly stimulated his potential. The shackles between man and sword were broken in an instant. The sword in his hand burst forth with infinite possibilities at will. I don't believe I can't force you to use your sword. Wen Lanfeng's fighting spirit soared. He exerted force again and trapped Bai Changchun in a net of sword gang. The two fighting figures became more and more blurred, and even the huge sword gang was flickering. The sky and the earth were suddenly, up and down, left and right, and loud noises were constantly heard. Hiss! Ancestor Nanming felt a toothache and his eyes were almost blurred. He gasped and rubbed his face with both hands. He said excitedly, "This trip is not in vain, not in vain. Wen Lanfeng is really amazing. He can actually fight with Bai Changchun to this extent." Nongzhu rubbed her blurred eyes and said suspiciously, "Why do I feel that something is wrong?" She then turned around and asked, "Nanming, if I remember correctly, the giant silver in Wen Lanfeng's hand should be a middle-grade spiritual treasure. Do you think a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword can trap Bai Changchun?" He and Bai Changchun were good friends. He knew that Bai Changchun once had a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword, but it collapsed because it could not withstand his strong cultivation. In other words, a middle-grade spiritual treasure could not withstand Bai Changchun's power at all. But how could he be trapped by a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword? Ancestor Nanming was slightly stunned. He happened to hear Bai Changchun mention this before. Now that he thought about it, it was indeed not right. He said in a muffled voice, "Maybe Wen Lanfeng's cultivation is profound, and he can exert the power of the giant silver sword to a higher level." Nongzhu shook her head slightly, feeling that this explanation was still a bit unreliable. From the fight just now, when Lanfeng was injured by Bai Changchun, it could be seen that the former was obviously not a match for the latter, and the gap was not just a little bit. It was a bit of a joke to think that such a gap could trap the opponent with just the sword gang. Nongzhu murmured, holding her chin, "What is old Bai doing? Is he deliberately letting him win?" It was not that he was letting Wen Lanfeng win, but Bai Changchun was getting more and more excited as the fight went on. He did not want to defeat Wen Lanfeng so quickly. He had fought countless times in the cultivation world, and he had seen all kinds of opponents. However, just now, he suddenly found that Wen Lanfeng seemed to have understood something. Facing the sword moves that he was barely supporting, Wen Lanfeng suddenly became at ease. This fellow actually broke through another shackle in this life and death struggle. And he immediately integrated it seamlessly. Bai Changchun secretly marveled that this guy was really a rare genius in the world. No wonder his cultivation could advance by leaps and bounds in just 100 years of closed-door training. What a pity. If he was not so infatuated, his achievements in the future would be limitless. Chapter 509. Bai Changchun shuttled through the sword energy like a phantom, looking forward to another surprise from Wen Lanfeng. However, after a long while, Wen Lanfeng only pressed harder and harder. The surprise he expected did not appear again. Bai Changchun sighed inwardly. It had been a long time since he met an opponent who could satisfy him. It seemed that his expectations were a little too high. With his disappointment, Wen Lanfeng suddenly felt that he could not bear it. Wen Lanfeng sadly realized that he had overestimated himself. Bai Changchun kept dodging not because he was forced to the point that he had no time to make a move, but because he had not made a move all along. It seemed that he was waiting for Wen Lanfeng to unleash his greatest potential. Perhaps he saw that Wen Lanfeng was only this good, so he lost interest in dawdling and began to counterattack. Bai Changchun's hands, which were originally behind his back, stretched out one of them and drew an ethereal and unfathomable shadow. Clang! Clang! The sword energy that was like a wild forest could no longer be freely wielded. Bai Changchun shuttled back and forth as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. From time to time, his two fingers would point at the smooth side of the sword energy that swept past, making a series of clanging sounds. Wen Lanfeng suddenly felt his arms go numb. The sword energy that he wielded seemed to have encountered a heavy resistance, and its speed gradually slowed down. The two people, who were originally so fast that they were like blurry shadows, gradually revealed their true bodies in the air. Even the women in purple could see their every move. "Oh no!" Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming exclaimed in unison. They could finally be sure that Bai Changchun had been holding back just now. Once he made a move, Wen Lanfeng would not be able to resist. Not to mention Nongzhu, even ancestor Nanming knew Bai Changchun's temper more or less. Since this guy had decided to go all out, Wen Lanfeng would probably be in danger. Just as Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming were on tenterhooks, a shocking scene appeared. The huge sword energy was no longer entangled with Bai Changchun and was retracted. Even though Bai Changchun was just casually pointing here and there, Wen Lanfeng really felt that she couldn't take it anymore. If she continued to waste time, she would definitely be exhausted. Wen Lanfeng retracted the huge sword and held the hilt with both hands. With a "ah" sound, he quickly slashed at Bai Changchun, giving him a solid blow. The speed and power of this sword naturally didn't need to be said. It had already brought with it the rumbling sound of wind and thunder. Bai Changchun stood quietly in the air, not dodging or evading. The others were shocked. "Humph!" He let out a cold snort that sounded like a Vajra subduing a demon. His tone was full of extreme disdain. This cold snort was simply a great humiliation to Wen Lanfeng. Wen Lanfeng was filled with grief and indignation, but he had nowhere to vent it. He immediately exerted all his cultivation and infused it into the sword that he slashed out, determined to succeed in one strike. The huge energy sword that howled like thunder launched a thunderous strike with the force to split the heavens and earth. Just as the sword was about to reach his head, Bai Changchun stretched out his hand again. No one saw when he stretched out his hand. The howling came to an abrupt halt. The huge energy sword did not move. It was not moving, but it could not move. Bai Changchun stretched out two fingers and firmly clamped down on the blade, causing Wen Lanfeng's all-out strike to be unable to advance even half a step further. His thunderous rage was quelled with just a lift of his hand. Wen Lanfeng pressed on the sword with both hands. His face was red from holding back. Bai Changchun was dressed in a light green robe. His thin face was expressionless. He had one hand behind his back while the other hand clamped down on the huge blade with two fingers. This was the scene in the air. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker at a glance. The spectators did not even dare to breathe loudly. This scene was deeply imprinted in their minds. Hibiscus's mouth was so wide that an egg could be stuffed in it. Her mind was completely blank. Zi crossed her hands in front of her chest. Her eyes were filled with little stars. As expected of Senior Bai, who I've admired since childhood. He's too perfect, Lady Mu bowed slightly in respect. The demon region's torture was naturally invincible. Otherwise, how could he intimidate thousands of demon kings and the ghost king? Nongzhu and Patriarch Nanming swallowed with difficulty. How many people in the world could block Wen Lanfeng's thunderous strike, let alone Bai Changchun's freakish move? He actually used his fingers to clamp it. It was indescribable. It was a blatant act of contempt. With extreme disdain, he stretched out two fingers. The expression on Wen Lanfeng's face could only be described as infinite grief and indignation. He had gathered all his cultivation into the sword, but it was stopped by the opponent's two fingers. The previous fight was like a cat toying with a mouse. This was 100 times worse than the humiliation he had suffered 100 years ago. He had come confidently as soon as he came out of seclusion. It turned out that it was just a self-made joke, the biggest joke in the world. Do you still think you're qualified for me to use my sword now? Bai Changchun asked indifferently with the sword in one hand. I've lost. When Lanfeng spat out those 3 words with difficulty. Didn't you want to test the bottom line of my cultivation? Why did you admit defeat so quickly? Bai Changchun continued to ask mercilessly, do you remember what I said? What? When Lanfeng asked blankly. Cultivators above the soul formation stage who trespasses into the demon region must die. Bai Changchun reminded in a cold tone. When Lanfeng's pupils shrank. Nongzhu was shocked and said, Old Bai, don't be impulsive. Let's talk. However, how could the current Bai Changchun listen to advice? Humph. Another cold snort that sounded like Vajra subduing demons rang out. Without the slightest hesitation, the hand holding the sword pushed forward at lightning speed. When Lanfeng felt a majestic and unparalleled momentum coming from the sword. He could no longer hold the sword with both hands. Bang! The sword hilt hit his abdomen, and the fierce chi went straight to his limbs and bones. Puff! He could not hold back a mouthful of blood. Old Bai, stop! Nongzhu shouted wildly. The others were shocked speechless. The world's #1 expert was going to kill someone. Bai Changchun twisted the 2 fingers that held the sword. The giant silver sword that had escaped from when Lanfeng's hand returned to its original shape. It flipped in the air and bounced in the direction of Shantian Island. Whoosh! Bai Changchun was still in his original position in the air, but another Bai Changchun suddenly appeared in front of Wen Lanfeng. Wen Lanfeng was shocked. Teleportation was useless when he was locked on by such an expert's chi. He quickly covered his body with protective vigor energy. Bai Changchun pointed out 2 more times. The 2 small fingers contained a tremendous force. With a bang, Wen Lanfeng's protective astral energy was shattered. He was sent flying, and with a pu sound, he spat out another mouthful of blood. Wen Lanfeng had just flown back a dozen meters when Bai Changchun, who had been chasing him all the way, arrived in front of him again. There was already a third Bai Changchun in the air. Wen Lanfeng struggled on his deathbed. He concentrated all his cultivation into a palm strike. At this time, when Lanfeng was already seriously injured and no longer had the ability to control the residual power of his battle. With this palm strike, the wild momentum rushed out like a stormy sea. Oh no! Ancestor Nanming exclaimed. A golden light flashed out of the storage bag and quickly spread into the sky. The entire obedient island was enshrouded in a golden net. The surging shock wave was blocked by this fine golden net. Shantian Island was safe and sound. However, the waves on this side of the 1,000-mile lake rose and fell. How could Bai Changchun care about Wen Lanfeng's palm strike? He clenched his fingers into a fist and brazenly punched Wen Lanfeng's palm. Wen Lanfeng spat out another mouthful of blood. His face was pale and he was sent flying again. The 4th Bai Changchun appeared like the god of death. The 3 phantoms behind him had not dissipated. One could imagine how fast he was. Then, he clenched his fist into a palm and slapped Wen Lanfeng's chest. Wen Lanfeng smiled bitterly. After suffering 3 consecutive lightning strikes from the sword hilt, a finger, and a fist, his body was extremely weak. Especially the last punch, which had scattered the vital essence in his body. He had no ability to resist and could only wait for death. In fact, in this world, how many people could withstand Bai Changchun's 3 lightning strikes? Only Wen Lanfeng, with his profound cultivation, could withstand it. If it were anyone else, they would have been dead. Wen Lanfeng's bitter smile hid a trace of relief. It was not an injustice to die in the hands of the world's #1 expert. When he saw Bai Changchun's cold and handsome face approaching, he recalled the woman with unparalleled beauty in Spirit Fong Valley. Will you occasionally think of me after I die? Farewell, my most beloved woman. What I regret the most in my life is that I couldn't see you again before coming here. 2 drops of crystal-clear liquid gushed out of the corners of Wen Lanfeng's eyes. He actually thought of Liu Yanqing before he died. Nan Ming, I'll **ck your ancestors. Nongzhu climbed the golden net and howled at the sky. His hands that were holding the net were already bloody. He had already prepared to teleport in front of Wen Lanfeng at the critical moment. He believed that Bai Changchun would not kill him. As long as he had a chance, he was not afraid of not being able to save Wen Lanfeng. He remembered that he had saved Wen Lanfeng in the past. Who would have thought that no matter how much he calculated, he would actually miss the golden net that Nan Ming ancestor had set up to block the impact wave? Just as Bai Changchun punched, he teleported over, but unexpectedly, he was blocked by this treasure. This treasure was an upper-grade defensive spiritual treasure refined by ancestor Nan Ming for his own use. Even a spiritual treasure of the same level would not be able to break it. Nongzhu wanted to tear it apart with his bare hands. With his cultivation, it was simply a dream. Master! Zi exclaimed. She had never seen her master so sad before. Furong and Lady Mu were even more confused. Ancestor Nan Ming was completely dumbfounded. He naturally knew what Nongzhu wanted to do, but he had ruined it. A series of events happened in an instant. Everything was unpredictable. Ah! Nongzhu helplessly howled while climbing the golden net. Now, no one could stop Bai Changchun. No one could stop him. No, there was one more person, maybe he could. In a flash, the 3 words, Yu Qianqiu, suddenly appeared in his mind. Bai Changchun's precious disciple, this was his last hope. No matter what, he had to try. Nongzhu impatiently shouted, Yu Qianqiu, stop. For Yu Qianqiu, old Bai, for Yu Qianqiu, you can't kill him. Stop, stop. It had to be said that this sentence really stopped Bai Changchun from slapping down. At the last critical moment, the 3 words, Yu Qianqiu, made Bai Changchun's hand pause, and the following words made him completely stop. Although it was said to be slow, it actually happened very quickly. Everything happened almost in an instant. The 3 shadows behind Bai Changchun gradually disappeared. He stopped his hand and stood quietly in the air, letting Wen Lanfeng fall into the 1,000-mile lake. Bai Changchun coldly glanced at Nongzhu, who was crawling on the golden net like a crab, as if asking what he meant. Before Wen Lanfeng fell into the lake, he opened his eyes, which were full of disbelief. He also heard Nongzhu's words. He didn't expect that the name Yu Qianqiu could save him from death. The cold lake water drowned him, and he had no strength to control himself. Bai Changchun's 3 strikes were too powerful. Not only did they scatter the real vitality in his body, but his bones and meridians were also injured. If that palm hit him again, he wouldn't have the slightest ability to resist, and his body would have been torn into pieces. The greenish-blue lake water was stained with blood from his floating body, and it spread out in strands. Nongzhu's eyes were wide open. With a cheer, he jumped down from the golden net, seemingly crazy and lively. Ouch! Oh my God! Ancestor Nan Ming sighed helplessly, and finally felt relieved. Who knew that this sound would attract trouble, bastard? Nongzhu roared angrily. She jumped over and grabbed his collar, punching and kicking him hard. Ancestor Nan Ming cried out in pain, but he didn't dare to fight back. After all, he was the one in the wrong. Son of **tch, have you had enough? Ancestor Nan Ming roared and pushed him away. Damn it! Aren't you going to retract your stupid net? Do you want Wen Lanfeng to drown instead of being beaten to death? Nongzhu roared. Ah! Ancestor Nan Ming's anger was instantly extinguished. Why are you still in a daze? I'll beat you to death, you bastard. Nongzhu rushed over and beat him up again. The girls were all dumbfounded. They didn't expect that a soul formation expert was also human. No, he had such a human side. I was wrong, I was wrong. Stop hitting me, let me retract the net. Ancestor Nan Ming crawled out from under Nongzhu's punches and kicks, his face covered with bloody fingerprints from when Nongzhu pulled the golden net. Ancestor Nan Ming cast a spell, and the golden net returned to the sky above Obedient Island with a whoosh. It shrunk into a ball, turned into a golden light, and shot into his storage bag. Nongzhu didn't have time to argue with him. In an instant, she appeared below by Changchun, looked up, and smiled foolishly at him. Then, he leaped to the lake's surface and grabbed Wen Lanfeng, who was smiling foolishly at him. Seeing this, he raised his hand and gave Wen Lanfeng 2 big slaps. Then, he picked him up and quickly flew to Obedient Island. As soon as he put him down, the others also came over. It's good that you're not dead, or I'll feel guilty for the rest of my life, Ancestor Nan Ming said with relief. He pressed his palm gently on Wen Lanfeng's chest to check his injuries. After a moment of silence, he exhaled and said, "Your true vitality has dissipated, and your meridians and bones are all injured. Fortunately, you have a good foundation. If it were someone else, I'm afraid they wouldn't have been able to withstand it. Think of a way to recover." Wen Lanfeng was secretly glad to be able to survive the disaster. Looking at the bloody fingerprints on Ancestor Nan Ming's face, he smiled knowingly. As a result, Nongzhu grabbed him again and gave him 2 more big slaps, scolding, smiling foolishly. "What are you smiling for? You're happy that I didn't beat you to death, aren't you? You're not F***king dead, but I have to clean up your mess. Damn it. If I knew this earlier, I would have let you die freely." Chapter 5:10. These 2 slaps gave the group of people a fright. Ze opened her mouth. It was the first time she saw how brave her master was. This was Wen Lanfeng, the second expert in the world. Yet, her master dared to slap him. How many people in the world would dare to do this? Ancestor Nan Ming touched his face subconsciously. This guy was crazy. He even dared to slap Wen Lanfeng. It seemed that he was not wronged. Although Wen Lanfeng did not have the strength to move, he was still sober. It was okay to slap him twice before, but why did he slap him twice now? Did he really think that his face could be slapped so casually? Wen Lanfeng immediately glared at him. "What are you looking at? Are you not convinced? Stand up and slap back. Aren't you very powerful? Why? Are you a bear now?" Nongzhu sneered at him. Seeing that he was not convinced, she immediately raised her hand again and shouted, "Do you believe that I will give you 2 more slaps?" Alas! Enough, enough. Ancestor Nan Ming hurriedly hugged his arm. Wen Lanfeng was not a toy. How could he let him slap him casually? He had slapped him and scolded him. Nongzhu's anger had dissipated a lot. Regardless of whether Wen Lanfeng was willing or not, he lifted him up and helped him to sit cross-legged. He slapped his back and injected his vital energy into his body, helping him guide the dissipated vital energy back to his meridians. With Wen Lanfeng's cultivation, as long as he converged his vital energy, he should be able to recover quickly. The group of people stood on the side and looked at each other. They finally understood what it meant to slap and scold each other for love. Bai Changchun teleported back to the island. He glanced around coldly and pointed at Furong, saying, "Follow me." Then, he slowly walked toward the big house in the center of the island. Hibiscus was immediately at a loss of what to do and didn't know what to do. Nongzhu, who was helping Wen Lanfeng guide his vital energy back, opened one eye and looked. Suddenly, she stopped and stood up. She said to Ancestor Nan Ming, "Come, I will take this girl." Ancestor Nan Ming nodded and sat behind Wen Lanfeng. Nongzhu waved to Furong, and the two entered the big house one after another. After entering, Bai Changchun still had that cold look in his eyes. Furong stood there uneasily, not knowing what to do. Nongzhu pointed at Bai Changchun and said, "Hurry up and greet him. This is Yu Qianzhou's master, the person your man asked me to bring you here." Furong walked over while trembling with fear. She knelt down and kowtowed, "Junior Furong greets Senior." As soon as she knelt down, she didn't dare to get up. The scene of the battle had been carved into her heart. She hadn't expected Yu Qianzhou's master to be so powerful. Her heart was thumping non-stop, and she was extremely nervous. Even Bai Changchun and Nongzhu could hear her heartbeat. Only when Bai Changchun asked her to get up did she stand up timidly. Seeing her lower her head as if she had done something wrong, Bai Changchun said indifferently, "Raise your head and look at me." Furong didn't dare to be disobedient. She hurriedly raised her head, but her eyes were a bit disobedient. She didn't dare to look straight at him, and she frantically avoided Bai Changchun's gaze. Bai Changchun stared at her eyes. Although she was flustered, her eyes were clear and pure. She wasn't a woman with messy thoughts. This was especially obvious on Furong. Looking at her eyebrows, it was obvious that she had lost her virginity. "You're Yu Qianzhou's woman." Bai Changchun's expression and tone had eased a lot. "Yes." Furong didn't allow others to question her. "When did you and Yu Qianzhou meet? Where did you meet? Why are you together?" Bai Changchun kept asking questions. Nongzhu looked at him in a daze, as if she didn't know him. Then she stood aside and pinched her chin, smiling inwardly. This scene was a bit like an ugly daughter-in-law meeting her parents-in-law in the secular world. Hibiscus naturally didn't dare to conceal anything. Apart from some of the things that Yu Qianzhou had told her, everything else was poured out like beans from a bamboo tube. She spilled everything. After that, Bai Changchun let her go out. He coldly looked at Nongzhu and snorted, "Tell me. What does it have to do with Yu Qianzhou to kill Wen Lanfeng or not? If you can't give me a satisfactory reason, Wen Lanfeng is still a dead man. It's useless for you to stop me. You can't do it again and again." Nongzhu's expression twitched. It seemed that if she didn't make up a satisfactory reason, Wen Lanfeng couldn't escape today. She smiled bitterly and said, "Old Bai, why do you do this? The cultivation world is full of deceit. It's not easy to find a few true friends. Although Wen Lanfeng is a little too infatuated, he's still a good friend. Why do you want to kill him?" "This is not the reason I want to hear," Bai Changchun said indifferently. "What a heartless guy." Nongzhu muttered and then said seriously, "I don't want you to kill him. Of course, I'm selfish as a friend, but at the same time, it's also for the good of Yu Qianzhou. Think about it. Yu Qianzhou is in danger when he travels among countries. If Wen Lanfeng helps him when he needs it, he'll be much safer, won't he?" Bai Changchun glanced at her coldly and snorted, "You mean, without Wen Lanfeng's protection, Yu Qianzhou won't be safe?" "Yes, you're powerful. As long as you show up, no one in the world will dare to touch your disciple." Nongzhu touched her forehead and said helplessly, "What will happen after you go to the Holy East Land? Do you think those old guys will be content with their place? Do you think Yu Qianzhou can control the demon region with his current cultivation? Even if I do my best to help, Yu Qianzhou and I can't stop those people's ambitions. But with Wen Lanfeng, it's different. You've seen his current strength. Except for you, no one in the world is his opponent. If Yu Qianzhou is in trouble, I don't dare to say for others, but I'm confident I can get Wen Lanfeng's help. You know, he's not a bad person." Bai Changchun was silent for a long time. His eyes were flickering. Later, he slowly closed his eyes and said no more. Nongju was secretly relieved. She finally convinced this old guy. At the same time, she admired herself for coming up with such a good reason. It seemed that she had been with Yu Qianqiu for too long and learned bad things. In the palace of Daong Kingdom, the winner of the lively martial arts competition was finally decided. As expected, Zhang Ping relied on his powerful skills to defeat all his opponents. No one was a match for him. Because of his extraordinary skills, people suspected that he was a cultivator. However, after the secret appraisal of several consecrators in the palace, he was indeed an ordinary person, not a cultivator. In the end, Zhang Ping did not know whether to laugh or cry as he accepted the crown of first place. Wen Yuyuan and Wen Bai of Baiwan Kingdom also did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yu Qianqiu had casually thrown out his follower and unexpectedly won the first place. Wen Bai also could not see that Zhang Peng was a cultivator. What made the two depressed was that Zhang Peng was a citizen of Baiwan. If he really became the son-in-law of Daong Kingdom, the fabricated background that he had previously registered would be exposed. They had to find a way to cover up his lie when they returned. On the same day, the emperor of Daong Kingdom, Zhao Heng, decided to host a banquet to entertain the diligent talents of various countries. At night, the palace of Daong Kingdom was brightly lit. People sang and danced, immersed in a festive atmosphere. The top 20 winners of the competition received the honor of sitting in front of the emperor. Zhang Peng was naturally among them. He could be said to be the most lively one. People constantly came over to toast and congratulate this prospective son-in-law. Zhang Peng's face was constantly twitching. In the eyes of others, they thought that he was overjoyed. The lights were waning, and people were singing and dancing. It was a scene of wealth and honor. Zhang Ping did not know how much wine he had drunk to drown his sorrows. He felt like he wanted to make himself drunk. At this moment, a palace maid suddenly came behind him and whispered in his ear, "The princess has ordered this servant to take young master to the West Palace for a while. Young master, please follow me." Zhang Ping was stunned when he heard this. He looked at the palace maid and thought to himself, could it be that I haven't officially married into the family, and that slut can't help but want to secretly have a rendezvous with me? I want to see what that slut wants to do. He was not afraid. He immediately got up and quietly left the banquet with the palace maid. The emperor, Zhao Heng, glanced at them and immediately recognized that the palace maid was his daughter's maid. He looked at the chief eunuch beside him and helplessly shook his head with a wry smile. The palace was deep, and there were guards everywhere. The palace maid held a golden token and led Zhang Peng without any obstruction. Zhang Peng was also worried that there was something fishy going on, so he memorized the surrounding terrain along the way. After entering a large courtyard, there was a faint fragrance. Obviously, they had arrived at the residence of a woman. The palace maid led him to a brightly lit room. Before entering the room, Zhang Peng looked up at the plaque above the door. The words Liu Xiangzhai were written in gold. As soon as he entered the room, he smelled the lingering fragrance of incense. In front of him were 3 women dressed in dignified white palace gowns. They were either standing or sitting, and their eyes were all fixed on him. The palace maid stepped forward and handed the golden token to the youngest of the 3. Zhang Peng understood that this woman was most likely the princess. Zhao Qinxiang took the golden token and waved her hand to dismiss the maid. Send word that no matter what they hear, no one is allowed to come in without my permission. Yes. The palace maid received the order and retreated. With a schwa sound, the door was tightly shut. Zhang Ping suddenly turned his head to look, and his heart secretly became vigilant. The other 2 women unscrupulously surrounded Zhang Peng and circled around him, sizing him up. The 3 people in the room were the 3 daughters of the Daong Kingdom's emperor, Zhao Heng. After the eldest Zhao Rongxiang saw him, she covered her mouth and smiled at the second Zhao Hanxiang. He is a strong and burly man. Zhao Hanxiang nodded and smiled. Third sister, you got lucky. The third Zhao Qinxiang's face was as cold as ice, and there was not a trace of a smile. She suddenly shouted, Zhangpeng, why don't you kneel and greet this princess? The eldest and second Zhao Qinxiang smacked their lips. Third sister was establishing her might. They could not laugh anymore and quickly retreated. Humph. Zhangpeng coldly snorted and said without moving, I am not a subject of the Daong kingdom. Why should I kneel to you? You have become my Daong kingdom's consort. Naturally, you are a subject of the Daong kingdom. Zhao Qinxiang sternly said. I haven't done it yet, right? Zhangpeng sneered. It is not too late to talk about it after I have done it. How dare you? Zhao Qinxiang shouted. Her figure shot up with a whoosh, rushing towards Zhangpeng. Under her dazzling white palace dress, she kicked out a pair of legs. With a series of kicks, she sent a strong gust of wind straight towards Zhangpeng's head. This skinny woman knew kung fu. Zhangpeng was slightly startled. His figure swayed left and right, and he quickly dodged. Hey! Zhao Qinxiang's consecutive kicks missed. When she leaped over his head, she swung her leg backwards and swept across the back of his head. Every move was ruthless and aimed at his vital parts. Zhangpeng was slightly annoyed. In this palace, it was not good to fight back against a princess, but this woman was going too far. Immediately, he blocked it with his palm and chopped down on her ankle, blocking that leg. Although he did not use much strength, when Zhao Qinxiang landed on the ground, a trace of pain flashed across her face. However, she clenched her teeth and resisted. Then, she bent down and swept her leg. Zhangpeng could not help but laugh. Even if he was not a cultivator, with his martial arts, how could she sweep him down? Thus, he pressed down on his lower body and simply stood there, letting her sweep him. Paw! When the two legs collided, Zhao Qinxiang could not help but let out a weak groan of pain. Zhangpeng originally thought that she would understand how powerful he was by now. Who would have thought that she would pull back her leg, press down, and spring at him again? Her 10 fingers formed into sharp claws, and without the slightest bit of politeness, she clawed wildly as if she wanted to ruin Zhangpeng's face. Although she was not afraid of being injured, she was wearing a mask. Once she clawed at him, she would definitely be exposed. Zhangpeng coldly snorted. This time, he did not hold back. His figure flashed, and with a swing of his palm, he slapped her lower abdomen and directly threw her back onto the soft couch. The speed of the flash was extremely fast, and in the eyes of the two women, it was just a flash of a shadow. The two of them revealed expressions of surprise. This Zhangpeng was very powerful. No wonder he could win first place in the martial arts competition. Zhangpeng, how dare you attack the princess? The eldest sister, Zhao Rongxiang, shouted. Zhangpeng ignored her and stared at Zhao Qinxiang, asking, Princess, I don't know how I have offended you, but you want to kill me? Zhao Qinxiang covered her lower abdomen with her hand, gritted her teeth, and said, I'll let you know what it means to be obedient. I'll let you know the consequences of not listening to this princess. After saying that, she rolled over and opened a long wooden box on the couch. 3 long swords with silver scabbards were grabbed and thrown out. Zhao Rongxiang and Zhao Hanxiang caught the swords and looked at each other. Zhao Qinxiang jumped off the couch with a sword in her hand and shouted, Eldest sister, second sister, set up a sword formation and teach him a lesson about the rules. Clang, clang, clang. The 3 swords were unsheathed. The 3 women flew like butterflies, and their swords intertwined with each other. Zhangpeng was speechless. How could all the daughters of the imperial family know martial arts? How did the emperor teach his daughters? As he dodged, he discovered that the youngest and unruly princess was the most vicious. The tip of her sword was actually aimed at his genitals several times. This thoroughly infuriated Zhang Peng. With a speed that was inconceivably fast for the three women, he flicked his fingers and easily seized the swords in the three women's hands. The three women stared at their empty hands in shock. Before they could react, they saw a figure flash by. They felt their bodies go numb, and they couldn't move. Zhang Ping took the opportunity to seal the acupuncture points of the three women, and with a swing of his sword, the swords were nailed to the wooden beam. Don't think that just because you are a princess, I don't care about a trifling Dian kingdom. Zhang Ping arrogantly threw down these words. He wanted to turn around and leave, but he immediately thought of the many guards in the palace. In addition, there were experts from the cultivation world overseeing this place. He really couldn't just barge in. His gaze fell on the gold medal on the small table beside the couch. He spat out the alcohol in his stomach and went over to pick up the gold medal. When he turned around and brushed past the princess, he caught a glimpse of the unruly princess's eyes filled with endless resentment. He was slightly startled and stopped to size up Zhao Qinxiang. He discovered that she was a delicate beauty with a slender waist and an alluring chest. His mind slightly heated up. He didn't know if it was because of the alcohol, but he now remembered his master's words to get the princess to bed as soon as possible. Since master has already said so, how can I not follow? Zhang Ping silently thought. As someone who grew up in a war, he paid particular attention to neatness. He turned around and moved Zhao Rongxiang and Zhao Hanxiang to face the wall. He then picked up Zhao Qinxiang and threw her on the soft couch. Zhao Qinxiang couldn't speak or move. She stared at Zhang Ping in fear, not knowing what he wanted to do. Hiss! Zhang Ping raised his hand and directly tore off her clothes. It seemed that he didn't know what gentleness was, and in a few moments, a white and tender body was revealed. Zhao Rongxiang and Zhao Hanxiang's eyes widened. Zhang Ping didn't notice that opposite them was a bronze mirror used for dressing up. The movement on the couch could be seen in the mirror. The two girls saw the man in the bronze mirror take off his clothes and press down heavily. If the two girls hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would have never believed that someone dared to humiliate the princess in the palace. Zhao Qinxiang's eyes widened and tears silently flowed. She endured the pain of a broken melon. She never thought that there would be such a daring person, and in the end, she fainted from anger. After Zhang Peng was done, he was also slightly shocked. He realized that he was a little too impulsive. He was secretly a little worried. Would something happen? After putting on his clothes, he pulled a brocade quilt to cover the beauty he had defiled. He took the gold medal and left without saying anything else. He really had the demeanor of a general. Just now, he was a little flustered, but once he opened the door, he regained his composure. He closed the door and showed the gold medal to the palace maids who came over. He said in a deep voice, "The three princesses have something to discuss." Without a summon, no one is allowed to enter. The palace maids acknowledged and retreated. He swaggered out with the gold medal and went back the way he came. By the time he returned to the banquet, it was already coming to an end. Just in time for the banquet to end, he quietly followed the crowd and left. Emperor Zhao Heng saw that Zhang Ping came back alone. He didn't even have a guide. How could the palace allow an outsider to trespass? With a suspicious look in his eyes, he signaled the chief eunuch beside him with his eyes. As soon as he left the palace, Zhang Ping quickly found Pingxi and Wang Wenyu to say goodbye, saying that he had something to do and would leave first. He also knew that the matter had gotten out of hand. Paper could not contain fire. He found an empty alley and quickly flew into the sky, returning to the small courtyard of the embassy. In the courtyard, Yu Qianqiu and Xan Lao San were drinking under the moonlight and chatting about the cultivation world. Zhang Peng's sudden intrusion almost startled Xan Lao San into making a move. During this time, there were too many people who were eyeing Yu Qianqiu covetously. When he realized that it was Zhangping, Xan Lao San was even more shocked. He didn't expect that this guy was actually a cultivator. Zhangping, what's wrong? Yu Qianzhou also noticed that there was something wrong with Zhangpeng's expression. Zhangping looked at Xan Lao San and stammered, "Sir, can I have a word with you?" Chapter 5:11. Third Lord Xan was unhappy to hear this. It was obvious that Third Lord Xan was trying to avoid him. Yu Qianzhou was startled. This was the first time he saw Zhangping like this. He thought that it must be something important. He waved his hand and entered the house with Zhangping. As for whether Third Lord Xan was happy or not, it was not his concern. It was not the time to care about Third Lord Xan's mood. Zhangping seemed to be afraid that someone would eavesdrop. With his early-stage tribulation passing cultivation, he barely set up a soundproof enchantment. Then he scratched his head, not knowing what to say. Yu Qianzhou looked him up and down and frowned. "What the hell are you doing? If you have something to say, spit it out. I have something important to do tonight. I don't have time to watch you pretend to be a woman." Zhangping gritted his teeth and finally told him everything that had happened. Yu Qianzhou's mouth opened wider and wider as he listened. After a long time, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He gave a thumbs up and said, "I thought I was a bastard enough. I didn't expect you to surpass your master. You actually dared to capture the princess in the palace. You are really not afraid of death. Don't you know that there are 3 old men in the last stage of tribulation passing in the palace? If they find out, they will kill you on the spot. No one will be able to refute it." Zhangping lowered his head in shame and muttered, "Master, you were the one who told me to get the princess into bed as soon as possible, *CK your sister. When did I say such a shameful thing?" Yu Qianzhou immediately rolled his eyes. But he couldn't finish his sentence. He remembered that he had indeed said such a thing. "Master, do you remember now?" Zhangping asked weakly. "Pfft. You were the one who did not control your lower body. Now you are blaming Master. How dare you say that? Why did I accept a beast like you as my disciple? Fortunately, I had the foresight to not let you call me Master in front of others. Otherwise, I would have lost all my face. Sigh. I am ashamed." Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed. "Master, I know I was wrong." Zhangping scratched his head awkwardly. "This can't be hidden for long. They will find out sooner or later. Master, why don't we escape first? Come on, I've always been an upright person. When have I ever escaped?" Yu Qianzhou poked his chest and said, "You have to bear the consequences of your own actions. Didn't you get first place in the martial arts competition? Anyway, the princess will be yours sooner or later. It doesn't matter if you try the horse first before fitting the saddle. You might as well stay in the Yang Kingdom and be the prince consort." Zhangping panicked. "Master, you can't go back on your word. You said that sleeping with the princess doesn't mean that I have to be the prince consort." "Shut up. I'm warning you, I've never said anything like that. You can't slander your master's character anywhere." Zhangping had just been scolded to the point of dejection. He rubbed his chin and muttered, "Damn it. Wasn't it just sleeping with a woman? What's the big deal? If you were a commoner's daughter and you dared to do this, I would cripple you immediately. As for the emperor's daughter, since the emperor has many wives, he must have many daughters as well." "Ah." Zhangping suddenly raised his head and weakly asked, "Master, you mean, don't give me that cowardly look. It's disgusting." Yu Qianzhou glanced at him and coldly said, "So what if she is the emperor's daughter? Do what you have to do. Master is here, what are you afraid of?" He then walked out. That's right, that's right. There's nothing in this world that Master can't handle." Zhang Peng suddenly became spirited. The iron tower-like man nodded and bowed. He was just short of massaging Zhang Peng's shoulders and back. He removed the soundproof enchantment and quickly followed. In the imperial study of the imperial palace, Zhao Heng was drinking a hangover soup from a eunuch. The head eunuch walked in with a taut face. He gave a look to the eunuch in the room and the eunuch quickly retreated. Zhao Heng looked at him and calmly asked, "What's wrong?" The head eunuch went over and whispered a few words. Zhao Heng could no longer sit still and stood up abruptly. "Paw!" The cup in his hand shattered on the ground. "Preposterous! Preposterous!" Zhao Heng roared madly. He kicked over the imperial table in front of him and strode out. After rushing to the imperial harem and informing the three Mi brothers of the news, they were immediately enraged. Someone actually dared to do that to the princess under their noses. If word got out, wouldn't they become a laughingstock? It was obvious that he didn't care about the three brothers at all. He clearly didn't care about Illumination Peak. Esteemed elders, I know that the Wen clan of Aquamarine Nation has an extraordinary status in the cultivation world, but I really cannot swallow this grievance today. I implore the esteemed elders to uphold justice for me. Zhao Heng cupped his hands in front of his chest and said angrily. He had already made up his mind. If the three masters were not willing to come forward, he would mobilize the army to besiege the Baiwan nation's embassy. Mi Russian said in a low voice, "We watched the third young lady grow up. We will naturally seek justice for her." He turned to the two sides and said, "You two stand guard. I will go to the Baiwan nation's embassy to ask for her." Then, he quickly flew away. The group of people from Baiwan nation returned to the embassy in a drunken state and dispersed. When Yu Yuan and Wen Bai had just walked into the main hall when they saw Yu Qianzhou sitting leisurely in the main hall. Zhang Peng stood silently at the side and third Axayan was looking around. Wen Bai walked over and cupped his hands and said, "Mister, is there anything?" His tone was very respectful. Ever since he saw Yu Qianzhou's heroism in the battle that day, he could not help but admire him. "Ha! Nothing much," Yu Qianzhou stood up and said with a smile, "We have disturbed you for many days. We are here to bid farewell to the two of you." When Yu Yuan and Wen Bai looked at each other worriedly. The latter frowned and said, "Is Zhang Peng also leaving with Mr.?" "Of course. We are also embarrassed to be living and eating for free," Yu Qianzhou said with a laugh. "Mister, do you know that Zhang Peng has already won the first place? There will be a ceremony in a few days and he will become the emperor's son-in-law of Daong Nation. If he leaves, how will Baiwan Nation answer to Daong Nation?" Wen Bai said gloomily. Sigh. "I'm afraid he won't be the emperor's son-in-law anymore. This guy has caused some trouble." Yu Qianzhou summarized Zhang Peng's scandal with great regret. "Ah." Wen Bai and Wen Yuan were instantly dumbfounded. Third brother Axayan suddenly turned around and stared at Zhang Peng without blinking. He thought to himself, "No wonder he came over in a hurry to whisper to me. So this is what happened. What's the difference between this and slapping Hua Zhongming's face? What guts? Originally, I didn't have the face to stay after causing trouble. But after thinking about it, I can't leave without knowing the reason and put the Wen family in a difficult position. So I waited for the two of you to come back and inform you so that you can prepare in advance," Yu Qianzhou said helplessly. When Yu Yuan's face was already dark. He was the one who arranged for Zhang Peng's registration. If the two nations became enemies, how would he explain to the monarch when he returned? Wen Bai's expression twitched. "Prepare in advance. How can we prepare in advance? If Mr. takes Zhang Peng away, I'm afraid none of us will be able to leave Baiwan Nation. TSK. As the younger generation of the world's second strongest expert, how can he be so afraid of trouble?" Yu Qianzhou shook his head and then asked suspiciously, didn't Senior Wenrui tell you the reason why he is in a hurry to leave? In fact, he also knew in his heart that Wenrui had no reason to tell such a big thing like Wenlanfeng coming out of seclusion. No. Wenbai shook his head. He wanted to ask but dared not. He was not qualified to inquire about matters of the upper echelons, but he showed an inquiring look. No wonder. Yu Qianzhou said solemnly, you don't need to be afraid of Dian nation looking for trouble because your old ancestor, Wenlanfeng, has come out of seclusion. Ah. Wenbai and Wen Yuan were shocked. The pillar of Baiwan nation who had been in seclusion for 100 years had come out. This was such a big thing. No wonder the old high priest was in a hurry to return. Ah. That's all I have to say. If they come looking for trouble, you can bring up your old ancestor. They won't dare to not give face to your old ancestor. We'll take our leave first. Yu Qianzhou cupped his hands and called out to Zhang Peng before leaving. He really wanted to leave, but he thought that he should not be too shameless. If he caused trouble for others, he should at least greet them and point them in the right direction. However, he had done too many bad things. Occasionally, a kind thought would delay him. It seemed that it was a little too late for him to leave now. They all paused at the same time. They sensed a divine sense sweep over them. Mi Russian had quietly appeared in the lobby, staring at Zhang Peng like a hawk. Yu Qianzhou also looked at Zhang Peng with an inquiring look. Didn't you say that no one would find out what you did for a while? Someone is staring at you like this, obviously for you. Zhang Peng was speechless. No one could explain if something happened to this thing. Wenbai and Wen Yuan looked at each other. They did not expect the other party to come looking for them. Third brother Axian did not care about the matter and continued to stay silent. Ha! Yu Qianzhou laughed and said, High Priest Mi, what brings you here? Mi Russian ignored him and pointed at Zhang Peng. He said indifferently, come with me. Damn it. I like people who are unreasonable, because I like to be reasonable. Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows. He waved his hand at Zhang Peng and signaled him not to speak. He said in a deep voice, High Priest Mi, you sure are powerful. You want people to follow you, but they have to listen to you. Yu Qianzhou, this matter is not up to you to interfere. You are too meddlesome. You should think about how to protect your own life. Daeong City will not let you hide forever, Mi Russian said expressionlessly. My life is in my hands. I don't need others to worry about it. But you, if you want to take my people away, you have to ask for my permission, Yu Qianzhou said bluntly. The scene of Ong Kwangsung Ching Fu coming to Fu Xian Island to ask for Guan Weiwu suddenly appeared in his mind. Guan Weiwu's silence made him feel cold. If he could not protect his own disciple, he would not be able to show his face anymore. Since when did Baiwan country's people become your people? Mi Russian squinted his eyes. Yu Qianzhou smiled coldly and said, Since when do you not need to worry about my people? Could it be that I still need to report everything to you? I want to ask you, what right do you have to take him away? You are asking him what he did. Mi Russian said sternly. Oh. Yu Qianzhou turned around and said, Zhang Ping, what did you do? Zhang Ping shook his head and said, I did not do anything. Chapter 5:12. Wenbai and the other two were speechless. These two were acting shamelessly. Mi Russian stared at Zhang Ping with a livid expression and said in a deep voice, You dare to quibble in front of me, I think you are tired of living. High official Mi, you are wrong. Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly, It is understandable that he did something bad and did not admit it, but I really do not believe that he did something good and did not admit it. Birds of a feather flock together. You two shameless people, you have no choice but to leave today. Mi Russian narrowed his eyes and stopped arguing with them. He suddenly disappeared in front of everyone. Teleportation. The others were shocked. Yu Qianzhou's eyes flashed with fierceness. He quickly turned around and locked onto Zhang Peng's surroundings. Zhang Peng also knew the situation was bad. His shoulders shook and his protective energy surged out. As expected, Mi Russian appeared in front of him in an instant and slapped with his palm, trying to forcefully shatter the other's protective energy. How dare you! Yu Qianzhou attacked with his palm almost at the same time and shouted, absorbing Star's great skill. Zhang Peng's cultivation was much lower than Mi Russian's. He tried to dodge but failed. Bang! His protective aura was instantly shattered. His whole body was sent flying to the corner of the wall, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Although when Yu Yuan was a prince, he was only a mortal. Seeing this, he felt his heart palpitate. These cultivators were actually attacking right before his eyes. When Mi Russian attacked Zhang Peng, he had already turned around to look at Yu Qianzhou. Seeing that the latter wanted to fight him in cultivation, he sneered. After knocking down one of them with a single palm strike, Yi Shuwen quickly countered with a palm strike towards Yu Qianzhou. However, the moment he attacked again, Mi Russian suddenly shuddered. He felt like something was rapidly flowing out of his body and his body was rapidly stiffening. Especially when the meridians in his body were rapidly contracting. His vital energy could not flow smoothly, dense white smoke gushed out from Mi Russian's body. Yu Qianzhou's palm was like a tube that attracted the wind. He followed Yu Qianzhou's advice and sucked the dense white smoke into his palm. Mi Russian's entire body shrunk rapidly, revealing an outline that was even drier than a mummy. His appearance was extremely horrifying. Third brother Xan, Wen Bai, and Wen Yuan were all dumbfounded. Crack. Mi Russian's palm was still moving, but the crowd saw a withered arm fly out from his sleeve. Yu Qianzhou tilted his body slightly and watched as the arm brushed past him and smashed into pieces outside the hall. He turned around to look at the skinny skeleton in front of him and sneered, "You're really willing to sacrifice yourself to throw your arm out to hit someone." This joke was really cold. Seeing Mi Russian like this, Third Xan and the others could not help but shiver. They felt like they were in a dream as they stood there, recalling everything that had just happened. Mi Russian was already unrecognizable. His dried skin shrunk and his bones tightened. His appearance was extremely horrifying, but he still stood firm. From the contours of his face, one could faintly sense the fear he had before his death. Yu Qianzhou glanced at Zhang Peng, who was slowly getting up from the corner of the wall while wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. A hint of fierceness flashed through his eyes. He walked to the mummy and said face to face, "High Priest Mi, you could have attacked anyone, but you had to attack my people. I will not give Hua Zhongming any face. Please don't take offense and punish him lightly." He took out the storage pouch on the corpse's waist and with a wave of his hand, a burst of green flames incinerated the corpse into ashes. Mi Russian disappeared just like that. Xan Lao San and Wen Bai looked at each other in dismay. Now they finally understood how Chu Dingfang died that day. The 4 words, absorbing Star's great technique, were deeply imprinted in their minds. What a terrifying technique. Yu Qianzhou looked as if nothing had happened. But in fact, he was secretly happy that he had once again proven the power of the water art. But he also understood that Mi Russian died because he was caught off guard. Plus, he was standing close to Mi Russian, which allowed him to maximize the absorption power of the water art. Otherwise, it would not have been so easy to kill Mi Russian. Seeing that Zhang Peng was fine, Yu Qianzhou cupped his hands at the others and said, "Goodbye." "Yu Qianzhou, where are you going?" "I will go too." Third Xan flashed over. Yu Qianzhou pointed at Zhang Peng and said, "He is seriously injured. I need to take him for treatment. Don't come and join the fun." "Are you seriously injured?" Third Xan looked at Zhang Peng suspiciously. He did not seem to be injured. He then asked, what about your promise to go to Lingfong Valley with me? Don't worry. I am a man of my word. I will definitely do what I promised. Yu Qianzhou confidently patted his chest. He thought to himself, I have to go just to see what the most beautiful woman in the world looks like. He casually took out a jade archive and wrote something in it. He threw it to Third Exian. Third Exian looked at it and put it away. He nodded and said, I understand. Yu Qianzhou was about to turn and leave when he saw Wen Bai and Wen Yuan looking at the pile of ashes on the ground with a worried expression. He knew what they were worried about. He smiled and said, I will bear the consequences of my own actions. Since I have already taken action, you can push all the blame on me. If they come to ask for Zhangping, tell them that I am the one who took Zhangping away and killed me Russian. Let them come to me. Goodbye. He was someone who had been tempered by blood and fire on the battlefield. Just now, he had killed to his heart's content, so he didn't have the heart to do so. A general's success is built on the bones of tens of thousands. Yu Qianzhou mumbled and put down his leg on the table. He stared at Guan Yu and shook his head, Yun Chang. I'm not a homicidal maniac. I definitely wouldn't kill so many people for no reason. I naturally have my reasons for doing so. You're a good person, but sometimes you're too soft-hearted. Looks like I need to arrange for you to go out with me. What do you think? Guan Yu was silent for a moment, then he shook his head and said, forget it. I don't need to change myself. This is good enough. In the future, let other people do the fighting and killing. I'll stay here and continue to do my own things. As he said this, his mind was thinking about the woman in white and ethereal palace. He sighed in his heart. Let me watch over her silently. I'm willing to watch over her silently for the rest of my life. I don't want to go anywhere. I just hope to see her once in a while, and I'll be satisfied. Yu Qianzhou didn't understand what he was thinking, but he could sense that he was a little depressed. He muttered, that's fine too. From now on, you should focus on training. The fighting and killing in the outside world really doesn't suit you. After exiting Dayang City's west gate, there was a wide official road. Following this road, it led to many countries. Third brother Exian rode a horse and followed the instructions in the Jade Archive, following the official road. However, after walking for half a day, he didn't see Yu Qianzhou at all. He began to suspect that Yu Qianzhou was playing with him. As he passed by a col between two mountains, he suddenly heard the sound of rushing wind. Third brother Exian caught it with his hand, turned his head and shouted, who's there? He saw Yu Qianzhou walking out of the forest on the hillside, holding a green apple in his hand and chewing on it with a grin. Third brother Exian's face lit up. He looked at the green apple in his hand and took a bite of it as well. However, he realized that it was so sour that his tongue was about to fall off. He quickly threw it away. Yu Qianzhou wasn't much better off. He was also vomiting non-stop. Third brother Exian cursed, Yu Qianzhou, how could you let me eat something so disgusting? Damn it. There's a wild apple tree in this forest. I took a bite and realized that it was disgusting. Yu Qianzhou said as he stuck out his tongue. Then why did you eat it so happily? You tricked me on purpose. Sigh. Didn't you say that we'd share blessings and misfortunes together? Why are you here? Third brother Exian looked around. Yu Qianzhou was still spitting out the acid in his mouth. He had paid a hefty price to trick him. As he vomited, he said, I've been waiting for you here. In fact, the Jade Archive he gave third brother Exian contained a strand of his own consciousness. He could contact third brother Exian at any time. Third brother Exian had just arrived here, and he had just left Utopia. He guessed that the cultivators guarding outside Daong City would have to wait in vain for a period of time. The two of them discussed where to go. Then, they released their horses and flew away together. Light Illumination Peak, Great Hall of Light. Mi Ruhai wept bitterly as he told his master the news of his brother's death. Hua Zongming's face was dark. He crushed the golden cup in his hand into a golden pancake. He said sternly, "Yu Qianqiu, how dare you?" From this, it could be seen that Wenbai had indeed followed Yu Qianqiu's instructions and pushed all the blame onto him. Return to the palace first and detain the people from Baiwan Nation. I'd like to see how the Wen family will explain this to me. Hua Zongming narrowed his eyes. I won't forgive Yu Qianqiu. Master, there's one more thing. Mi Ruhai wiped his tears and said, the Wen family said that their ancestor, Wen Lanfeng, has come out of closed-door cultivation. What? Hua Zongming was shocked. He asked again, what did you say? The Wen family said that Wen Lanfeng has come out of closed-door cultivation, Mi Ruhai repeated. In fact, when he found out that his brother had been killed last night, he had wanted to kill a few people from the Wen family to vent his anger. Who knew that Wenbai would suddenly say that Wen Lanfeng had come out of closed-door cultivation, which shocked him. He naturally knew what kind of person Wen Lanfeng was. He was someone that even his master was wary of. Although he was angry, he did not dare to cause trouble for his master. He could only suppress his anger and return to Light Illumination Peak to report to his master. That love addict has come out of closed-door cultivation. Hua Zongming slowly sat down and thought for a while. He sighed and said, don't touch the people from the Wen family for now. I'm no match for that guy. Don't provoke them for now. Wait until I've gathered the information. You go back first. He had no choice but to obey his master's orders. Mi Ruhai choked and left. At this moment, a strong man directly flashed into the great light hole. After bumping into Mi Ruhai, he frowned and said, Ninth junior brother, what's wrong? This person was Hua Zongming's eldest disciple, Lu Qingjian. He looked much younger than Mi Ruhai, but in fact, he was older than him. Mi Ruhai choked and said, eldest senior brother, my eldest brother was killed by Yu Qianqiu. Ah! Eighth junior brother was killed. What happened? Lu Qingjian asked in shock. Mi Ruhai rambled again. The former was so angry that he laughed and said, what a good Yu Qianqiu. He dared to provoke our Light Illumination Peak. Qingjian, why did you come here in such a hurry? Hua Zongming asked, feeling a headache coming on. Master, misfortune never comes alone. Lu Qingjian took out the little black flag of the hero and walked over. Our 17 spirit stone mines were destroyed overnight. What? Hua Zongming stood up again and snatched the little black flag. After looking at it, he sneered, another hero. I thought he was only targeting Yin Baikong. So he specifically landed in our Daong kingdom to cause trouble. I wanted to watch Yin Baikong get into trouble. What do you mean by the spirit stone mines were destroyed? Lu Qingjian clenched his fists so hard that cracking sounds could be heard. 17 spirit stone mines were completely destroyed, and all the spirit stones that were delivered were looted. Several thousand disciples were slaughtered, and not a single one of them survived. It will be very difficult to recover. The great light hall instantly quieted down. Mi Ruhai no longer cried and quietly retreated. To Light Illumination Peak, this matter was much more important than his eldest brother's death. The 17 spirit stone mines were the main source of Light Illumination Peak's spirit stones. If he continued to cry, he might be punished by his master. It was better to obediently return. This is not looting. Someone is taking revenge on me. Otherwise, there is no need to be so ruthless. Hua Zongming's face was gloomy. He opened the flag in his hand and said with an unpredictable expression, "The master of this hero should have a grudge against me. He is someone I know." 17 spirit stone mines were attacked in one night. Hee. This was premeditated a long time ago. Master 8th Jr. was killed on the same day as the attack on the spirit stone mines. Do you think this matter is related to Yu Qianqiu? Lu Qingjian asked suspiciously. It shouldn't be. Hua Zongming shook his head. This is not something that one person can do. It is impossible for us to not know that Yu Qianqiu brought so many people from Huaxia. With his cultivation, it is impossible for him to travel to so many places in one night. As he said this, his face suddenly turned sinister. Investigate. Use all the people that can be used. Don't worry about other things. Investigate this matter first. I want to see who is behind this. Lu Qingjian immediately went to make arrangements. Such a big matter naturally could not be hidden. In a few days, the news spread throughout the cultivation world. The mysterious hero once again caused an uproar in various countries. Yin Baikong, who was on Cornucopia's God of Wealth peak, had been depressed by the previous incident. He had mobilized his subordinates to investigate everywhere but to no avail. When he heard this news, he was stunned at first, but then he laughed out loud. At first, he thought that the hero was specifically targeting him. He did not expect it to be even more ruthless this time. That bastard Hua Zongming must not be laughing anymore. Perhaps he was also implicated by that bastard last time. The hero must have been cutting grass to kill a rabbit, robbing him along the way. In fact, the main target was Hua Zongming. Otherwise, there was no need to be so ruthless. After thinking it through, Yin Baikong felt much better. After being depressed for a long time, he finally decided to go down the mountain to see how business was going. Chapter 5:14. World Commerce. Speaking of world commerce, one had to mention its founder, Yin Baikong. Yin Baikong could be said to be an extraordinary person in the cultivation world. It wasn't because of his high cultivation, but because he liked doing business. He was unique among the spirit-severing experts in the cultivation world. It was because of this that he founded World Commerce. The headquarters of World Commerce was in Cornucopia. The tallest mountain in Cornucopia was called God of Wealth Peak. This series of names were all given by Yin Baikong himself. From this, it could be seen that Yin Baikong really did have a hobby of doing business. Even now, when his cultivation had reached spirit-severing late stage, he would still personally pay attention to business matters. Cornucopia could be said to be the most prosperous place in the cultivation world. Of course, Yin Baikong wasn't the only shop here. Otherwise, his business wouldn't be so prosperous. Every country had their own shops here. The flourishing area around the foot of God of Wealth Peak was Cornucopia. Yin Baikong himself often stood on God of Wealth Peak and gazed down. Thinking back to the barren mountain valley that had become the flourishing area it was today, Yin Baikong was often very proud. Cornucopia Hall was where world commerce's money came and went. The spirit stones that flowed here every day, if converted to high-grade spirit stones, were at least 10 million. At this moment, in Cornucopia Hall, world commerce's disciples were counting the spirit stones that flowed in and out. Jing Yuankong was overseeing this place. Yin Baikong had his hands behind his back. Like an old merchant, he barged in and looked around. When World Commerce's disciples saw Yin Baikong, none of them actually said anything. They just glanced at him and then lowered their heads to do their own things. Jing Yuankong was slightly startled. Master had always been in a bad mood. Why did he come down today? It seemed like he was in a good mood today. Jing Yuankong hurriedly bowed and then led his master to the back hall. Because the front hall was a busy place, chatting was not allowed. This rule was set by Yin Baikong himself, and he had always been the first to follow it. When they reached the back hall, Yin Baikong's first words were, "Has everything been normal?" "Everything is normal," Jing Yuankong replied. Yin Baikong nodded. "Cornucopia Hall is about to begin. How are the preparations?" "Everything is being prepared in an orderly manner. It won't affect the Cornucopia Hall," Jing Yuankong said seriously. Cornucopia Hall was the largest trading event in the cultivation world. It was held once every 10 years. At that time, there would be a large number of cultivators from various countries. It could be said to be exceptionally prosperous. It was also the time when the World Chamber of Commerce was rolling in money. The master and disciple talked about business for a long time. Finally, Yin Baikong asked, "How are the inner disciples doing?" "I'm not too sure about that," replied Jing Yuankong. Yin Baikong nodded slightly and did not blame him. Of the two disciples, Jing Yuankong was mainly in charge of business matters. The eldest disciple, Sikong Ju, was in charge of the affairs of the sect's disciples. Some of the more secretive matters had always been handled by the eldest disciple, Sikong Ju. Jing Yuankong didn't care about it, which made him feel more at ease. In fact, Jing Yuankong had also concealed one thing. He knew that Guan Zhongkai had been forced to admit defeat by Yu Qianqiu, but he did not mention it. After all, he was the eldest senior brother's disciple. If he were to say it, he would be suspected of sowing discord. As for whether or not the paper could wrap up the fire, the responsibility would not fall on his head in the end. East Sea Everlasting Island. When the news of the 17 spirit stone mines in Huazhongming's territory being looted spread, cultivators from various countries were discussing it. It became the hottest topic on the island. In the deep mountains and valleys of Wuji Island, there was a constant rumbling sound. A phantom was flashing everywhere in the forest of rocks. Wherever the phantom went, the huge rocks would crumble into pieces. Man Hu and his fellow disciples were watching from the side of the cliff with their arms crossed. After a while, the rumbling stopped and the phantom flashed up the cliff. A cloud of black mist gradually dissipated, revealing Yan Zhuixing's naked upper body. His muscles were incomparably sturdy. Compared to his previous skinny and weak self, he was like a completely different person. After receiving the clothes from Man Hu, Yan Zhuixing looked at the broken rocks in the valley and shook his head. "My demonic charm movement technique hasn't been able to make any progress. Looks like it won't work just by relying on external force. I need the help of the 7-star blood orchid." "State Preceptor, where can I find 7 stalks of 7-star blood orchid?" Man Hu muttered, "I can think of a way to get 1 or 2 stalks, but I'm afraid it will be difficult to get 7 at once." "Didn't you say that in the World Chamber of Commerce's upcoming cornucopia meeting, there is nothing you can't buy as long as you can afford it? I wonder if I can buy the 7-star blood orchid I need there?" Yan Zhuixing asked. "Don't worry, young palace master. I have already reported this matter to Master. Master will naturally pay attention to this matter. As long as the 7-star blood orchid appears, Master will definitely buy it at all costs." Man Hu said. Yan Zhuixing nodded, turned around and said with a smile, "I wonder if there is anything new in the various countries recently." Man Hu and his fellow disciples looked at each other and found that this young palace master was becoming more and more concerned about the various countries. He would often ask questions. They didn't know what he was thinking, but he definitely wouldn't ask for no reason. They were afraid that there was an inside story that others didn't know. Something new happened yesterday. The 17 spirit stone mines in the Daong Kingdom were looted overnight. After that, all the spirit stone mines were destroyed. Man Hu said with a smile. "Oh." Yan Zhuixing's eyes flickered for a while and said with a faint smile, "Could it be that Hero did it again?" "Ah." Old Seven said strangely, "Young palace master, How do you know that it was done by hero? Hee hee. Seems like I guessed correctly. Yan Zhuixing looked back and thought that it wasn't the first time Yu Qianqiu did something like this. He had already done it when he was in China. This was completely Yu Qianqiu's style, stealing chickens and dogs and disturbing people's peace. Old Seven nodded repeatedly and said, young palace master guessed correctly. It was done by that hero. Damn it. I don't know who actually has the ability to rob 17 spirit stone mines in one night. Even Hua Zhongming couldn't do anything to him. He's probably hopping mad right now. Man Who waved his hand at Old Seven and turned around to ask, young palace master, do you want to continue cultivating demonic arts or go back to rest? State Preceptor, I want to walk around the various countries. What do you think? Yan Zhuixing looked at the distant mountains and said slowly. What? The few of them said in surprise. They didn't know why he suddenly had such an idea. Yan Zhuixing turned around and said to the few of them with a faint smile, I often hear cultivators from various countries talking about the excitement of the cornucopia gathering. I really want to go and see if I can find the 7-star blood orchid I need. The few of them looked at each other. Man Who frowned and said, the situation here is so tense. How can you leave, young palace master? The cornucopia gathering is held once every 10 years. Young palace master might as well go next time. The situation is tense. Yan Zhuixing glanced at the few of them and sneered, is it really tense? Why can't I see it at all? Although there are constant small battles, the various countries seem to prefer to waste time here. No one is willing to carry out the final battle. It doesn't matter if I'm here or not. This Man Who smiled bitterly and said, young palace master, don't be anxious. There is a reason for this. Wait a year or two, and the various countries will definitely rush to attack. Oh. Yu Qianqiu walked to the edge of the cliff and kicked a stone. He watched him go down and said, what is the reason? Can State Preceptor tell me honestly? Man Who thought for a moment and walked to stand beside him and said, this isn't a secret that can't be told. The various countries are all worried about the #1 expert in the world. By Changchun.